Good evening, everyone. I would like to call this special meeting to order. It is February 25th, 2020, and it is 4:02 p.m.
Let the minutes reflect that adequate notice of the holding of this special meeting of the Howell Township Council was provided for in the following manner: by the posting of a copy of said notice upon the bulletin board in the Township Municipal Building on February 13th, 2020, by the emailing of a copy of said notice to the Asbury Park Press, Tri-Town News, and Star Ledger for information and publication on February 13th, 2020, by the filing of a copy of said form of notice in the Township Clerk's office on February 13, 2020. The public will be allowed to attend and will be allowed to participate pursuant to the Open Public Meetings Law. The public is reminded that civility and decorum will be maintained during the meeting. Any contracts awarded at this meeting or between now and the next meeting will be required to comply with the requirements of Public Law 1975, Chapter 127, NJAC 17:27. In accordance with the Fire Prevention Code, be advised that this facility is designed with emergency exits for your safety. Upon exiting the meeting room, they are to your left and to the right. Furthermore, smoking is not permitted in the municipal building. Please take note that this meeting is being videotaped for possible future broadcast on Howell Television. Roll call, Mr. Bonovich.
Present.
Ms. Richmond is absent today. Mr. Russo?
Here.
Deputy Mayor O'Donnell?
I think she'll be coming late.
Yes, that's
Mayor Berger?
Present. I'd like to stand for the pledge. Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you. Are there any reports, gentlemen?
No, Mayor. As requested, we have public budget hearings for our Department of Community Development, Public Works, and Police Department. Each presentation will include all of the cost centers that those department heads oversee. First up, we have Community Development. So we can get right to it.
Could you just tell me which page it is so I don't have to search? The J page.
It begins on J4, Mayor.
Thank you.
Mayor, we are going to start today. We have Matt Howard, our Land Use Director, Justin Yost, our Deputy Director of Community Development, and Paul Orlando, our construction official, with us today. They're going to lead the presentation. They're going to do a very brief overview of all the cost centers that encompass community development, and we're going to go through some of our budget line items, and then we'll open to questions at the end for you. Or if you have a question as you go, let us know. So,
I will.
With that, Justin, would you like to take off?
Sure. Good evening. Prepared a brief PowerPoint presentation. The first slide just goes over the 5 cost centers that are part of our department. It includes engineering, planning and land use, zoning, construction, and code enforcement. And we have right now a total of 26 employees. Like I said, the rest of the presentation is kind of broken up into the 5 different cost centers. So we'll start off with engineering. In 2019, we had 2 long-time, 30-plus year employees that retired. We replaced one had one come in last July for a replacement, and then another one that came in September for a little bit of an overlap between the 2. So right now we have 3 licensed professional engineers and 2 staff engineers / inspectors in the engineering department. In 2019, we processed 241 road opening permits, 60 pool permits, 15 plot plans, and approximately 236 other engineering applications, which is sewer, change of use, grading, retaining wall plans. Also, as part of our department, what we call private development applications go in front of the Planning and Zoning Board. Once those are approved, they come to our office for what we call resolution compliance, which is the final cleanup, make sure that the deeds are all done, all the outside agencies. So any time that we spend on those private development applications are billed to the escrow accounts for the applicants. So last year in 2019, we billed approximately $178,000 to these escrow accounts to help offset the salaries of the department. Like I said, besides the escrow accounts, we're also involved in the day-to-day operations of engineering with the town. In 2019, we did several drainage projects, pipe replacements. We also started what we call a patch program, which I'm sure you've seen it around town. It's where we have streets that are in relatively good shape with isolated areas of failure. So we had a contractor that's kind of going to individual streets, and it's not milling and paving the whole street. It's just fixing the small areas of that street that hopefully allows the street to be reused for several years before it needs to be repaved. One of the capital projects we did was the Casino Drive, which was we prepared the construction plans, provided the project management and inspection for that project. Currently for this year, we're preparing plans for 3 projects where we have grants and state aid for, which is Havens Bridge Road, Howell Road, and Lanes Mill Road. There's been a lot of talk going back and forth with consultants and what we can do in-house. So this is just a couple of examples of what we're doing in-house that usually would have went out to consultants. Another project that obviously everybody is aware of is the Freewood Acres Sewer Project. We're heavily involved in the overseeing and coordinating that with the residents. Like I said, we're looking to give just a brief overview, and then we'll go to the salary and wages page and just give a quick rundown of those. And, if you've got any questions, let us know. 2019, the adopted budget for engineering was $416,167. Again, like we said, that included the retired employees and the 2 new employees we brought on, so there's a slight overlap. So for 2020, we're asking for salary and wages, actually a reduction of $55,500, which that includes the 2 employees we lost. So as far as the increases for contractual salary and step increases, those are shown. We hired the 2 new employees, and we've also increased the amount that we're assuming for escrow by $10,000. As far as the other expenditures, we're looking to increase that by roughly $11,500. On the next sheet, it gives a breakdown of that. If there's any questions, we can go over that.
Those are in your budget binders, the line item movers in there, if you have those in front of you.
Yeah. Before we move on, in 2019, the Casino Road, in the past, that was always outsourced, correct? Things like that, as far as...
Usually a consultant would have had.
So that was in 2019. In 2020, about, would you say there's more jobs like that done in-house with the new employees that you hired, or?
Yeah, we're doing a couple more jobs.
Moving on to the next cost center, if there's no other questions. It's planning and land use. That really makes up 2 different groups, the planning board and the land use portion of that cost center. Land use has 2 employees. It's myself as the director of land use and an administrative assistant. We had some movement within the group just in the cost center. The administrative assistant came in from code enforcement just because they were doing more work on the land use side. We also removed the guarantees coordinator position. You'll see that in your line movers later. We processed almost 1,400 land use applications, which is the most since I've been here. Based on our digital records, it's the most we've done in the last 4 or 5 years. That was almost $100,000 in review fees, and on top of that, we did over 1,200 inspections. That's when we go out and double check that everything we issue a permit for was done right, so that we can make sure that we have compliance going forward. The planning board really doesn't have any employees because the board secretary is captured under the zoning board cost center, so we'll go over that later. She processed, our board secretary processed 37 planning board applications that totaled over $285,000 in fees, which is by far the most I think we've ever taken in under our planning board. If you go to the salary and wages sheet, focusing on the line movers, like I said, we had the administrative assistant come in, the guarantees coordinator position come out, with just the contractual step increases and salary increases. We're actually showing a net decrease of $31,000, almost $500. It's a decrease there. As for the other expenses, just an increase really in legal services. We're expecting a couple lawsuits to be filed based on board cases. We tend to under budget for that, so we want to make sure we're prepared for that. But overall, it's almost $27,000 decrease, almost a decrease of 12.5%.
Next is the construction department.
No.
No?
Zoning?
Next is the zoning
Sure.
board. This is where the planning and zoning board secretary is located, so she's the only employee here. Processed 43 zoning board applications on top of the 37 planning board that we had mentioned earlier. Collected over $69,000 in fees for the planning board. That's a total combined of over $350,000 for the year for just the boards, really with just one employee processing that work. Going to the salary and wages, the line movers is really just a contractual salary increase. Also adding in some more legal services under the other expenses. Based on those two changes, really, we're increasing the budget by about $6,000, which is 6% based on the fact that it's a small budget. That's about $6,000 increase.
Hey, Matt?
Yeah.
Yeah, well, Lou, when this $355,000 was collected in 2019, that goes right to the general fund? Where does it go? I'm saying that, yeah.
Yes, correct. When we collected those funds in 2019, that would go right into the general fund and be available towards what was anticipated, and any excess would go to surplus.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, next is construction. As you can see, there's a total of 14 employees, 5 in the administrative and assistants, 7 inspectors, and myself and 1 part-time, which is a lot of standing employees. During the course of the year, the staff reviewed and issued almost 6,000 permits, performed close to 14,000 inspections on UCC, which is our code, and the township ordinance is non-UCC, 5,200. So in collecting the fees, total revenue for the department was just about a little over $1.5 million, which includes permit fees, penalties, violations, and other various collections. Going over to the breakdown of total dollars and variances. Upgrade request is for not a new inspector, but inspector that's moving up, and then contractual increases, get too much about. We went down in the part-time seasonal, we dropped to 10,000. So there's an increase of 68,000, which is 7.5%, and that's about it.
Sir, UCC, Uniform Commercial Code?
Yes, is all your construction and permits, housing, commercial, all that. Non-UCC would be your tenant-to-tenant fit-outs and things like that.
The next cost center is code enforcement. We currently have 4 full-time code enforcement land use inspectors. We have 1 additional employee doing about 75% housing, 25% code enforcement, depending on what the workload is. We have 1 administrative assistant. Those employees throughout the year did over 4,000 inspections. Almost 450 complaints were responded to and abated throughout the year. Housing alone performed an additional 488 inspections. The group processed 1,600 applications, which is our vacant property, property registry, landlord registrations, rental certificates. We also issued over 1,700 violations, 390 summonses, which is about a 78% compliance rate. It's usually about the norm that we see. And between fines and all the applications and registration fees, it's about $286,000 taken in. If you go to your budget sheets and the line movers, we did have our longtime code enforcement official retire. We promoted from within, one of our outstanding employees who really deserved it. So you'll see that on top of our contractual step increases and salary increases, we have a promotion for that code enforcement official. The retirements are noted, and we also removed the administrative assistant, moved over to the land use cost center, like I described earlier. The replacements came in entry level or one step above, so their costs were much lower than the retirements. So we show about a $28,500 reduction from last year. Also, just with new employees, with the other expenses, I mean, they're mostly modest increases for uniforms. We like to clothe our new employees. So it's about $27,600 decrease, 8.4% from last year to this year.
So those are the 5 different cost centers within our department. The next slide we're showing is kind of an overall breakdown between the 2019 budget and the 2020 budget. The first 5 columns are the numbers we just spoke about, but I think the most important one is the last line, the total for the department. The overall operating budget was $2,112,700 in 2019, and we're looking to reduce that $62,700 for approximately a 3% decrease to $2,049,979 for 2020. The next slide is pretty much the same thing. It just goes back for a 6-year time frame of the department's budgets. And you can tell the last 4 years, the overall budget's been right around $2 million. The next 2 slides are showing the fee intake. This one's for the last 6 years. Just to highlight a couple numbers. The first section is engineering. You'll see last year, or this is between 2018 and 2019. In 2018, we took in $250,000. Last year, we took in $402,000. The major increase was the road opening inspection fees. The New Jersey American Water and the gas company both did a lot of main replacements, so they submitted application and inspection fees for the road openings. Same thing with the planning board. In 2018, the total intake for the planning board was $115,000, and in 2019 increased to $386,000. That's just applications that went in front of the planning board. Zoning board was pretty consistent, $74,000 in 2018 and $69,400 in 2019. Those are all the applications that went in front of the zoning board. As Paul mentioned, the construction department took in $1.5 million last year compared to $1.3 in 2018. And same thing with code enforcement, a small decrease from $328,000 in 2018 to $286,000 in 2019. But the next line shows the overall. So in 2018, the department took in $2,112,000, and in 2019, it increased to $2,697,000.
I'm sorry, but I can't see that. So could you just tell me the construction numbers again for 18 and 19?
They're on those sheets I just gave you. I
know,
gave
but
you
I'm
clear
kinda like
copies because they were
Oh, okay.
a little,
Thank you.
the quality for whatever reason on the
Okay.
PowerPoint's not that great.
Flip
Thank
to
you.
Flip to the next
I'm good.
slide. So maybe this slide's a little clearer. This just shows the 2018-2019 comparison. It shows the percent changes in each one from year to year.
I think it's just it's the quality of the PDFs, they're bad.
So again, the overall summary is the total intake increased by 28% from 2018 to 2019. The operating budget from 2018 and 2019 was increased by 12%, but we're looking to reduce that by 3% for this year. Very last column there shows the consultants, what the review escrow was for 2018 compared to 2019, an increase by almost 29%. And for the consultants, the inspection escrow increased by 10.4%. So that's our brief summary of the department and what we're looking to do in 2020. If there's any questions?
I don't have any right now.
On here, as far as the fee intakes, you know, in 16, in 15, there were 273,000, 16, 517, 17, 583. Then it halved in 2018. Now we're back up in 2019. I know it's only 3 months in, but how do you feel comparable 2019 to 2020 as far as your fees intake?
Just for engineering?
Yeah, just curious.
The water company's got several water main replacements. They got the transmission main that's going on right now, Maxim saw their Maxim. They also have Candlewood. They have 2 other phases going on there. So I think the road opening fees will definitely be high.
Okay.
You know, same thing with the escrow. We're getting more involved in the.
So we're looking at a higher, like, it's not going to be like a 2015. It'll be like more like a 19 or 17, correct? With the road openings, you think?
Yeah, probably more in 2018, 2019.
All right.
One other point I want to make on this is if you look at the code enforcement fees, you'll see that our fines and violations are down. And I think that's a testament to the guys working with the residents, trying to get them to abate the violations. I mean, we're not trying to fine everybody, we're trying to get compliance. And one of the big things is each year we get better and better on the landlord registration fines. You know, we've made it a point to try to get email addresses, so we actually email them ahead of time, you know, saying, hey, guess what, it's due January 1st. So we've dramatically reduced that number, which has also then reduced the fine volume, so it's kind of a good thing. Also, the landlord registrations have gone up, just a testament to our guys making sure people are registering with us. And lastly, the abandoned property registry, that took a pretty big hit. Well, that's because we're getting properties to get into compliance now. There's less properties that are abandoned, which is a sign of a good economy, hopefully, so things are turning around a little bit. So even though our revenue in that is down, it's not really a bad thing for the town. We would, you know, we're okay with those numbers going down. So just wanted to point that out. Any other questions?
No.
No, thank you.
Bruce? All right. Thanks, guys.
Gentlemen, I just want to say thank you. That was well prepared, and I really enjoyed the presentation. Thank you very much.
And thanks for the 6 years. That's very helpful.
Helps, right?
Yeah.
It's interesting when you look at it.
Yes. Thank you.
Thanks for the 2.9% cut, by the way.
We're here to help.
Makes my job very easy.
Next up, we'll have the Department of Public Works.
And the J page?
10.
Thank you.
Gentlemen, good evening. Thank you, sir. Ooh, thank you.
Good afternoon, Mayor, Council.
Good afternoon.
As you know, I'm Paul Novello. This is Brian Greenfield, Deputy Director of Public Works. And we're here today to present our 2020 salary and operating expense budget request. Public Works is broken down into 7 cost centers that you can see here. Out of the 7 cost centers, we have 30 different lines of accounting that we track. Last year, for an order of magnitude, we did almost 1,000 requisitions, keeping very busy. Public Works comprises of 56 employees total and 4 part-time employees. Next slide. Our road department, they're the guys who are out paving the streets, fixing the infrastructure, the storm drains, the basins, mowing the lawns, collecting the brush, collecting the leaves, collecting the bulk. They have 35 employees in this cost center. Out of the 35 employees, 14 of the employees will be receiving a contractual step increase this year. We had 2 employees in the Basin Maintenance Trust last year. Since that's dwindling, we decided to move one out of there into this line of accounting. We are asking for 3 additional laborers, and I am asking to upgrade 1 laborer position to a maintainer. That's to operate our new spider lift that the Shade Tree Commission purchased for us. We did decrease our overtime and our part-time. We decreased our uniform spending this year because every other year we contractually purchase cold weather gear for our workers. Last year was a cold weather gear. This year it's not.
Do you have a number for the overtime that you decreased?
How much we decreased it? Yes, ma'am.
You'd like, I have that information. For 2019, we had budgeted $130,000 and expended $75,000. Through prior discussions, we had reduced that by $30,000 already, that line.
And I forgot to mention, if you do have any questions, please go ahead and ask them. Sorry, ma'am. We decreased our conference fees and our training. Last year, Brian was finishing up his CPWM courses at Rutgers, and this year didn't need that cost anymore, so we decreased that. Next slide. Buildings and grounds. They're the gentlemen who are going around fixing all our facilities. We're in charge of course, Town Hall, our Criminal Justice Building, the library, the Senior Center, Public Works Garage, Echo Lake Pavilion. So we do quite a bit out there. In this cost center, there's 10 employees. Out of the 10, 5 of them will be receiving a contractual step increase this year. We are looking to upgrade 1 laborer to a maintainer. We also saw a decrease in overtime this year, and the increase in our operating expenses is largely due to herbicide and fertilizer treatments, remulching, and a generator service contract. We spent a lot of time and effort trying to beautify this building and some others. We want to keep them nice. That's why we're looking to do the herbicide and fertilizer. If there's no questions, I'll move on to the next. Vehicle maintenance. They're the guys who keep all our vehicles and heavy equipment running, and it is a daunting task. There are 8 employees in that cost center, 6 of which are receiving step increases. We had a part-timer down there 3 days a week running around, getting parts, keeping the area clean. We're looking to make that person a full-time DPW1. We just feel we can do a lot more with him on board full-time. We decreased overtime on that. Sorry, Lou, I'll speed up if you want.
Oh, no, sorry.
And we decreased our vehicle wash budget. Next slide.
That went down to 0, I think, right?
No.
Well, close there to it.
I'll tell you
Somebody.
exact amount
With
on
vehicle
that.
washes, we consolidated all the departments into one line item. In previous budgets, each department had it separated out, and we actually discovered we were being charged different amounts for varying departments. So by consolidating it into one line, it's a little easier to capture that way.
I think we actually cut it about half
Yeah.
this year from last year.
Okay.
Town Hall, we have 2 employees, and both of them are due for a contractual step increase this year. They pretty much work full-time in this building, keeping everything running here. Again, we saw a decrease in overtime, and we're increasing their expense. The operating expense is $3,500, just trying to do some work here to fix up the facilities. We increased our utilities costs based on projected and anticipated costs.
Yeah, that went up very high, the utilities number. It went up $65,000. That's the anticipated number for this building?
No, that was townwide. And that number was protracted out in September. and I had to make a guess what it was going to be throughout the rest of the year. That number is high. I think we can cut that down probably 50,000 easy. But once again, when I put in my budget request, that was back in September, ma'am.
Okay.
Next slide. Solid waste. Last year, we saw an increase in our tub grinding of the brush. We're only allowed to have a certain amount of brush at any one time, I think 17,500 cubic yards. That's at our yard. We also are allowed that much at Harm's Pit if we have an emergency like we did with the storm of last year. We are getting a lot of brush, and we might have to do 2 grindings this year based on the amount of brush coming in from the residents and what we pick up. The curbside recycling, it's just a mathematical number of residents times 207 per month, and we did see an increase in our landfill fees.
Can I go back
Yes, ma'am.
to buildings and grounds?
Yes, ma'am.
So, under buildings and grounds, under the expenses, we had, at 2019's budget was 115,000. You only expended 100,000, but this year you added 25,000.
Yes, like I said, we're trying to take on some more projects and do some more beautification here throughout the buildings.
Okay. I'm so sorry. All right, it was just the utility, it was 37% increase, that's why above, that's why I was
And
questioning that.
there's something we also added a generator warranty, 5-year generator warranty for all our,
To utilities?
pardon me?
To the utilities line?
No, I'm talking about to the buildings and grounds.
Oh, I'm talking about the
expenditure.
utilities line. I went back to it.
I'm sorry.
Mayor, if you give me a second to
Sure.
pull that up. We did make some adjustments. As I said, these numbers you're looking at were submitted back in September, so he's trying to project through the year end.
No, I understand.
In addition to having the year-end numbers, we also had a purchase agreement for utilities that we had a solid year's worth of data, so we've tightened that number up a bunch. I'll give you the latest in a moment. Do you have that? What did we cut from?
No, we didn't. In town hall.
No. Here we go.
10 minutes ago.
And if somebody could explain to me, I'm sure you must have done this in the past, but I'm going to ask it again because I probably forgot. Specialized expenses, what is that?
It's dare I say, a catch-all for...
Dare you say yes, you dare not say that.
A catch-all for certain, if we have certain kind of contractual obligations that don't fall, with outside vendors that wouldn't fall into any other kind of documented sub-account
Cushion
that we have.
anywhere there?
No,
No?
honest.
Okay. Continue, please.
50,000. 50.
Mayor,
Sure.
that line was reduced by 50,000,
Which one, I'm
the
sorry?
utilities.
It was reduced to 50 or by 50?
By 50,000.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Paul, do you see, going back to the utilities for the building, you said there's an increase. I just want, just to be clear with your printout, increased expenses $3,500 for this building, correct?
Town hall.
This is on page 6
I don't have those.
of the PowerPoint,
$2,500 increase, correct.
for this
He's
building.
talking about this.
That's for
Yes.
this building alone.
That's what I wanna know.
About $3,000 of that is for a 5-year warranty on our generator.
Okay,
The 5-year warranty is gone. We had to re-up it this year. So anything goes wrong, we're still under warranty. It's one of those things that we really needed to get
Got
in
it.
there.
Sure.
That was the bulk of that. The other was for mulch and the memorial island we put out here to just maintain and
Perfect.
beautify the area.
perfect. Thank you.
And may I add that the reason why we have the town hall cost center is each year with the county, we have to effectively file a profit and loss statement based on the building. it's something that all businesses have to report to the county. So in order to have the township capture some of the costs of operating this building, that's why we have a cost center here that is specific to town hall as opposed to the other cost center that is, general buildings and grounds.
I see no issue with separating it out.
Okay.
Okay, I think we were on solid waste, we were just finishing that up. Any questions on this line? Clean Communities, that's funded through a grant. There's 4 employees, 1 full-time, our Clean Communities Coordinator, who is certified through the state, and 3 part-time workers who go around the parks and clean up. They also do roadside cleaning. This is largely based on the grant amount. I am requesting an incentive step increase for our Clean Communities Coordinator to an 18.7.
To a what?
At the step, she's an 18, we're trying to get her up to a 7, step 7.
From 18 to 7?
No, she's an 18.5, we're trying to go up to an 18.7.
Oh,
2
8.
steps.
A 2-step increase.
There's no other questions on this?
Does this generate any, this is funded totally by the grant?
Yes.
Her salary's fully covered by the grant?
Yes.
We are due to find out, I believe it's May or June, what our final allocation from Clean Communities will be.
Do we know what it was, what was it in the past? Have we ever had it?
Yes,
So-
we've had, this is a grant that we receive every year.
Annual.
Last year, our final number was $122,124.
But, and then what about in 18? Has it been going up every year, or is it,
It's been right around in that 110 to 120 range, and it has increased over the years. I can obviously provide that information to you,
I was just wondering if it would
Yeah.
cover the increase, the request for the employee?
Well, normally, at the beginning of the budget season, because we don't know what our final number is going to be, I normally budget very close to what was awarded in our lowest year, because I don't want to over budget and then find out that our final award is lower than that. So what is absolutely covered through the budget, that is for salary and wages and O&E, so we can allocate it between either item, and it can definitely cover her, the
increase.
requested increase.
Thank you, Lou.
The recycling, that's also a grant, which more than covers this. I think this year we got, Lou, got about 10,000 with the recycling grant?
Yes, we receive a recycling tonnage grant every year, based on, I believe it's, passed with our, tipping fees, correct? That we report to the,
You have to file this very in-depth report with the state based on all the tonnage that is recycled, broken out into different categories where the ultimate disposition of the recycled materials is, and submit that to the state, and the state divvies up their allowable grant funds to the different municipalities based on how they do with the tonnage. It's about 2 years behind, I think, so I think what we're getting for this year was what was earned in 2018. So,
which is 18,742. Last year, we had actually received 37,308, so it did decrease a little bit, but as Mr. Novello said, we are looking for our records for 19, it should increase.
and this line item is used for the stipend for the Certified Municipal Recycling Coordinator, and also any CEU training that she's required throughout the year.
And she's really, since she's become the recycling coordinator, she's really stepping up the efforts in the town. She's really reaching out to all the businesses, so we're hoping to see that grant go up.
Excellent.
Yeah, Mayor, if I can add, I know she was starting an initiative to contact all the businesses to find out about their recycling, which would be included in the report she submits annually, so it shows a higher recycling volume.
Very nice. Thank you.
Okay. Here's a snapshot comparing 2019 to 2020 changes, the percent increases. I just want to make a note that out of the salaries, about 250, a little over 215,000 is due to contractual step increases. And then here's a multi-year look back, kind of an eye chart. And if there's any questions?
This is interesting, actually. So the 2018 budget for grounds, building and grounds was 91,000, and in 1 year it went up to 754,000?
I can explain that, Mayor.
Thank you.
So, in order to better capture, at the request of Mr. Novello, we extracted the
All the workers within buildings and grounds.
grounds got moved from the road cost center to buildings and grounds.
Oh, so you just reallocated
We
them to different cost
reallocated to
centers.
a cost center,
Moved them from the road
correct?
department into buildings and grounds, because to me, it portrayed a more accurate picture of what our expenditures are.
Thank you for that.
You're welcome.
Very nicely done, gentlemen. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Mayor, the only one we have left is the police department cost centers, and we're running ahead of the projected schedule, so Chief Kudryk's on his way.
Sure.
Can I suggest a
Could we,
10-minute recess?
yes, we'll take a 10-minute recess.
Okay, Mayor, if you're ready, we can resume the meeting. We have the police department ready to go with all cost centers.
I'd like to resume the meeting at 5 o'clock.
Good evening.
Good evening.
So I have a short presentation that I threw up on PowerPoint just to give an overview of the PD, including some of the significant increases in the budget. So hopefully, after this, it'll explain a little bit more in detail. If we can go into it, if there's any questions, I'll be able to explain it more, what is not explained on here. But first, I want to thank you for, I never had the opportunity officially to thank you for my contract. I greatly appreciate it. I wish the other two were here as well. I would thank them as well. But the universal, unanimous decision on it sent a very strong message, not only to me and my family, but to the police department and to the community as well. And for that, thank you. Second, I know you have a tough decision up there with the financial environment that we live in. I do the same within the police department. I understand it. I try to run the police department like it's my own business. And those that have sat in on the Citizens Academy, when I go over the budget portion of it and the structure of the police department, I pretty much hit on that for a majority of my presentation. Even though my bottom line is not profit, it's service, I still have, obviously, all the employees. I still have my customers, which are the citizens, and I still have the governing body, which is my board of directors that I got to report to. So I take it very seriously, and it's something that I constantly am in check on. So if we could just advance the slide. So here is our most recent organization and structure of the police department. And I just want to give you an overview of this for you to understand, because when I start going into some of the responsibilities and the duties and the operations of the police department, you have a better understanding. This basically entails all that we do in the police department. And again, for those who are not intimately familiar with the operations of the police department, it's not just the patrol officer that you see out there. There's a lot that goes into it, and you'll hear me reference it again when I talk about a finished product. because that's what the public, that's what the governing body sees. They see the finished product, but they don't understand what goes into that product that we put out there out on the street. 3 divisions in the police department. Each of them are manned by a captain. So if you look off to the left, you start off with the gray area, the administrations division right there, which also includes records. That is run by Captain Rizzo, and you can see that most of his responsibilities fall with the Detective Bureau. Most of our patrol, that falls under Captain Pilecki. Once they get assigned a call, if they don't follow to its conclusion, if it's worthy of an investigation, it gets pushed off to the investigations division. And you can see that branches off into many different areas as well. Records and firearms, also, and we're going to get into a little bit later when we talk about personnel. It's the first time in the history of our police department we've had 3 task force officers assigned outside of the police department. 2 of them are full-time, 1 of them is part-time. We have 1 assigned to the FBI full-time. We have another one assigned to the Monmouth County Prosecutor's Office with the Narcotics Strike Force full-time. And then we have a 3rd one assigned to the State Police Gang Task Force, specifically the biker gangs, because we started seeing an increase of their activity here in town. So we thought we would spearhead that, jump in front of that, and get involved in that as well. That's only once or twice a week. The benefits to having task force officers, and this goes into all the manpower when I talk about manpower, and your question to me would be, if we're hurting for manpower, why would you assign other people to other jurisdictions? Well, it comes back to the PD, it comes back to the relationships, it comes back to the resources that we have available, because it works both ways. They're able to bounce a lot of stuff off of us, and we're also accessible to a lot of the federal forfeiture. So right now, we have about $1 million sitting in pre-forfeiture and a pre-forfeiture account as a result of our FBI, and that doesn't include some vehicles and other assets that we have as well. So that should start coming in probably within the next, because it takes about 18 months for the federal government. We've had the task force officer up with the FBI. It's going on almost 2 years now, so we should start seeing some of that money start come in. And the manager will tell you that I spent a significant amount of my forfeiture money. That doesn't have to come out of the budget. And most of that goes into our community events, a lot of our outreach that we do, and some other non-budgetary items.
Chief, if I can interrupt real quick. For the governing body's clarification, just so you understand, that forfeiture money cannot be used to offset budget expenses. If we're supposed to be budgeting something, we can't assign it to that account. I just want to make sure everyone was aware of that fact.
Thank you.
So I'll give you a quick example of something that it was used for. So patrol cars would come out of a normal operating budget. Forfeiture cannot be used for that. That prevents, there's laws in place that prevent a governing body by cutting a police budget saying use your forfeiture. However, undercover vehicles that I have can be purchased for narcotics-related purchases. So we have several of those vehicles that I purchase using forfeiture. They're not regular patrol cars. They normally wouldn't be included in a normal budget, so that gives me the ability to do that. Send personnel away to some advanced training. If my budget doesn't really call for that, not a normal operating expense, I can use it for that. You see, like the challenge coin ceremonies, I just recently purchased all of our cadets brand new uniforms. So stuff that the taxpayer doesn't have to pay for. Something as simple as having a pizza party for our police cadets. The taxpayer shouldn't be funding a pizza party for our police cadets, so that comes out of forfeiture money. So it just gives an example of that. And we still continue to get equipment from LISO, which is the LISO program. That's also tied into the federal government as well. And we've also been able to get Public Works a lot of machinery, forklifts, tractors as a result of that as well. So obviously the most visible is in the center there, which is the light blue. Center is the Patrol Division. Patrol Division is pretty extensive. That covers communications and also the patrol. We all know what the patrol does, but communications under technical services, it's getting to be very complicated, very complex when it comes to all of the technologies that are in a police department. That's run by Sergeant David Levine right now. Under him, he has communications, and he also has IT, and we'll get into that a little bit later. And that's split 911 and also network services. We just recently instituted e-summonses, which now the officers don't have to write summonses anymore. They do it right through the computer inside the car, which it also prints it out in the car as well. We're just working out some of the bugs in that system, but that's up and ready to go as well. A tremendous amount of benefits to that. It increases the efficiency of the officer. It also enhances a lot of the accuracy as far as what's put on that summons, which then is pushed directly through the court system. So it's very, very efficient. So off to the right there under support services, see all the stuff everything that supports the other two units of divisions of the police department. And under that, you have the tactical unit, Homeland Security, the police cadets, resume, chaplaincy programs, grants, it's all in there. And plus our EMS unit, which is its own separate budget, that is run through our services unit. And I can get into that a little bit later on. Our traffic safety unit, I'm happy to report that we just added 2 additional officers to make a complement of 3 officers in our traffic safety unit. I'm sure that you hear about it, you see the emails. That's probably the number one complaint that we have from our residents is speeding. Everybody has a speeding issue on their street. I agree with it. We've already curtailed a lot of the narcotics, and I'm going to get into that in a minute. We already curtailed a lot of the narcotics end of our investigations because that was a growing problem in our town for the past few years, and that has drastically been curtailed, and you'll see that in a minute on another slide. So obviously you can see it's very complex when it comes. It takes a lot of people to do this. Every chief will tell you that they never have enough. I will tell you later on, at a certain number, I do have enough. I'm not going to be the chief that sits here and keeps telling you I need more and more and more. I'm pretty realistic when it comes to that. And even though about this authorized strength, we'll get into that a little bit later. I also have proven that I've always been told, and they teach you in these classes as well, that once you have a line item, you don't give up that line item. For instance, honor guard. If I have $2,500 in my honor guard line item year after year, you never give that up. You never give it up. But I gave it up because I don't need to buy any equipment this year. We have it, and if I do need to buy equipment, I'll pull it out of my forfeiture. That's something it can be used for. We also reduced, we had a pre-budget meeting on November 26th. We also went through and made some cuts before I presented this to you today. So I'm pretty honest when it comes to that. I don't have any type of fluff in my budgets. I don't work like that. At the end of the year, when I do have some sort of reserve left over, it's because a result of either we found a better way to do something, we ended up finding a cheaper vendor, or Sergeant Dave Levine is very good at, he can't be here today, but he's very good at getting these vendors down from their original prices. So that enables me to buy some additional equipment in the police department that I didn't normally have budgeted for. So just to throw that out there as well. Can we advance the next slide? I want to keep advancing it. So I just want to talk about the heroin problem here. So back in 2004, it really started coming about. This is back when I was a lieutenant. You'll see since 2004, several hundred people from this town has died. We were once ranked 18th. If you stay right there, we were ranked 18th in the state with East Orange, Edison, and Cherry Hill. Keep going. And as slowly as we started to do our work here in town, we went down to 20th. Then we're 23rd. And now as of last year, that one right there says 2019. The next slide, we're 189th. So that is tremendous.
Amazing job.
That is tremendous work by everybody in this town, and that's thanks to the governing body for allowing us and providing obviously the funds in order to have the officers out on the street, allowing me to do my job as a police chief. It's the community, it's the alliance, it's our businesses, it's just our schools. It's a collaborative effort amongst all of us in order to come with that stat. I'm very proud of that. That is something that not too many police departments can say, that they went from 18 to 189th in the state. Very embarrassing. I came in as a chief in 2015, in July 1st, 2015, and we're ranked in the top 20. Not a good stat you want to be as a chief of police, especially a new one. But I'm proud to sit here before you 4.5 years later to show you that we're 189th in the state. And we see it. It's not just a number. We see it in our town as well. We see that the overdoses are down. Very rarely do I ever get an overdose text anymore. It got to the point that I wasn't getting them because they were so common. But now I don't get them because they're just not happening. And we see that. I had dinner over the weekend with somebody that's heavily involved in the recovery efforts in town here, and he even mentioned that it is basically, it's well known how well we did with conquering this problem. But again, it's not just the police department's success, it's a success of everybody sitting here and everybody sitting in the community. So again, this is the final product, but what went on to get to this was a lot of work. Okay, next slide. So just an overview right now, this is where we start getting into the meat of the current budget right now. So when you take a look at the 19 versus 2020 budget, you'll see that there's an increase of over $1 million just on the personnel side of it. The expense side of it, on the operating expense, it isn't a significant amount. And there really is only an increase in that because of the personnel that are being requested. And I'm going to get into talking about the authorized strength and the numbers, and I know I've beaten that over the past few years, but I'll show you how effective it can be once we reach a certain level. So I'm requesting 8 new officers in this year's budget, coming in at $50,554 apiece, gives me a total of $404,000. An evidence technician, that number actually can be wiped off right now because I just hired one of my former detectives who was our evidence technician. I hired her back as a Class 2 special police officer, and she's going to be doing that at her own, at a part-time each week. So there's no need for me anymore to be requesting a civilian evidence technician, so you can take $40,000 off that right off the bat. A legal advisor for the police department. This is something that is up and becoming in police departments due to how complicated and complex the laws are getting with the police department, with Oprah, with the body-worn camera system, with case law, everything that's being directed down to us through the Attorney General's office. It's getting to the point that even though Joe Clark does a nice job here, and Sean Kane does a nice job as a part-time prosecutor, I need somebody in the police department, whether it's this year or next year, or we find a way to start getting that labor advisor into my police department in order to guide policy, guide directives. The prosecutor's office, they're very reluctant to get into any type of municipal-based policing as far as providing any type of advice. They always tell us, seek your labor or your township council. So that's something that I'm looking to do. Again, it's on a wish list, obviously, and it's something I can do without, but it's something I want you, if you can please start considering that either this year or maybe next year, start phasing that in to have that legal representation inside our police department.
I have a question.
On a full-time. Yes, ma'am.
So the legal advisor, that's a full-time position at $75,000. Is that a lawyer?
It is.
So a lawyer's going to take $75,000?
So that was, the manager asked me the same question. So my whole intention behind that is to get a retired prosecutor, assistant prosecutor from the prosecutor's office, who knows county policy, who knows county directives, who knows how to work the court system. And for a retired, that was the number that I was provided as a starting, as a guidance, yes, as a guide.
Okay, thank you.
So,
Chief, I'm sorry, I have one quick
Yes.
question about the evidence tech.
yes,
Is there training involved in that position?
there is training, but she's already trained in that.
She's already, all right, perfect.
She's already trained. So that's Detective Corporal Carroll, Nancy Carroll. He retired last July, and she was the backup evidence technician. So she's the one that can do crime scene. She can do fingerprinting. She can do DNA. She has authorization. She has a training to be inside our evidence vault and processing evidence when it comes in from the officers. So she came to me last month. She's been retired for 7 months now. She came to me asking if she knew that this was something I was looking to do, because obviously I prepared this budget back in September. I got back to her. She originally was going to stay retired. She came back to me asking if I would be interested in having her back on a part-time basis only. She doesn't want to work full-time. And I said, you know what, that works out. It works out perfectly for me as well. It also goes into my whole model of getting some of thes responsibilities away from some of the officers. So now I have a detective now that can be free of some of the evidence responsibilities now when she is working, and he's mainly working on our backgrounds in our police department. So Detective Nagy right now is our main evidence officer. So, but he also does all the backgrounds. He does the liquor. He does all the dispatchers. He does our specials now. He does our police officers. He does all the backgrounds on them as well. So it's going to provide him. It's going to free him up some time to do that as well. And she's coming in at $25 an hour. Okay. So this is something that I started talking to management about, was having in-house custodian. I know it conflicts with Public Works, and I don't want to take any credit away from them. They do a very good job. But my police department is a 24/7 operation. It got to the point that, yes, we had DPW in there up until 9 or 10 o'clock on a Friday night, but midnight through Friday, all day Saturday, all day Sunday, and then Monday afternoon, they were coming in to clean. It went 3.5 days. There was garbage being piled up. Again, I sent a letter to my staff saying that, listen, you guys can obviously dump out a trash can as well, so they'll take some responsibility for that as well. But it was other stuff that was going. The floors were dirty. The bathrooms weren't being cleaned. So we need somebody in the building, and this is a part-time position. This was split up on a daily basis, one shift in the morning, one shift in the afternoon, to always ensure that we had somebody in there. Again, Public Works, when I talked to Director Novello, what he did was, as a nice fix, every Monday morning now, instead of waiting until 3 o'clock in the afternoon, Monday morning, he's sending somebody in to start emptying out all the garbage cans and cleaning up the bathrooms after 2.5 days. So our police department, it's an active place, even though we're a smaller department. I mean, we're not New York City or Jersey City or Newark. It's still a busy time of the day during the weekend. So that was something. Can those numbers be adjusted? Yes, because obviously anything is better than what we have now, in addition to what we have now. So again, that is not something that I'm obviously putting my foot down on. It's something that has come up over the past few years, that we needed somebody in our police department all the time, not just Monday through Friday from 3 p.m. to 11 p.m. And again, Director Novello has helped us out on that by bringing somebody in on Monday morning. But it's very limited throughout the week. And also, something we newly instituted, and this was approved by the manager, was a SLEO 1 program. If you guys understand how the SLEO, the part-time police officers work, Special Law Enforcement Officer 1, these are basically kids. They're 18 years of age. They don't have any type of arrest powers. They're basically our administrative assistants around headquarters. Right now, they're helping out with fleet. They're doing inventories. They're doing mileage. They're doing a lot of things around the police department that frees up other police officers, things that police officers shouldn't be doing. They're helping out with my staff. They're also going to be visible around the shopping centers. I was fortunate that we used to have a very robust bicycle program, whereas patrol on bikes on a shopping center is a reservoir. That faded out over the past 10 years or so. I was able to get those bikes all fixed up. They got them renovated, and so you'll be seeing these kids on bikes throughout our shopping centers, throughout the reservoir. They're able to do traffic control out of parks. Again, it'll reduce the amount of overtime of how many police officers I have out there, such as Howell Day, National Night Out, Trunk or Treat, or any other large events that we do. So we currently have 2. We're going up to 4. And again, they're working at minimum wage. They're kids that are coming from our police cadet program, and we made them SLEO 1s. If they do well, we'll make them a SLEO 2, and then pathway them to become a police officer. What's not considered in this budget, when you see everything printed out and you see it's $1 million increase, what's not being considered is the retirements. As such, there's 2 officers that just retired over the past month that are still inside the budget. Their full salary was in there. That was Lieutenant Dodd. She just retired last week. And Corporal Bishop, he retired last week as well. There's going to be a request to have both of them replaced, and I'll get into the 2-for-1 request later on in a further slide. Next slide. I want to talk about where we were, where we're at, and where we could be going. So where we were back in 2009, we were at 99 police officers. That's the highest we've ever been in our police department. Obviously, when the recession hit, a lot of police departments took a hit on that. I know we went down into the 70s. All of our specialized units, whether it was K-9, school resources, traffic, that's where we lost our traffic unit. And again, we just added 2 more finally after last year. That's when all of our detectives went. We stopped answering a certain amount of calls. Neighbor disputes, lost property, found prop, we just didn't answer them anymore. People either had to come in and self-report it on a kiosk. That was actually one of my projects when I was captain. So if you come into our police department and you see that ATM looking machine, that's actually a self-reported kiosk, because we didn't have the time to take those low priority calls. Brian, if you just keep clicking. So back then, 2009, 41,733 calls for service, taking up 23,000 of our hours. So I just want to show you a comparison as to when we get to where we are. So back in 2009, the overtime was budgeted, well, that 4,026, that's motor vehicle stops. I just pulled out one number. You'll never hear me talk about summonses. It's definitely not a good number to talk about when you're talking about policing. 2009, what was budgeted was $580,000 in overtime. You see what was actually spent. In 2015, so look between 2009, where it was $580,000, it was actually spent out of that budget was $541,000. So fast forward a few years, back when we lost all those men, just stay right there for a minute. When we lost all those officers, where we dropped down into the 70s, 2015, we were at $800,000. What was budgeted was $800,000. We were trending at $1.3 million. So when I became police chief on July 1st of 2015, we were already at $650,000 in overtime. That's how you get to the trending. First 6 months, 650, remaining six months, another 650 for 1.3. I just enacted a couple cost-saving measures in there because I knew that there were simple things I could do in order to reduce some of that, and we just came in at about $1 million. So we saved about $300,000 in 6 months in 2015. 2015, 2016, we started hiring more officers. We've hired 19 since I've been chief. Obviously, a bunch have retired as well. But if you go back down here where it says 2,000 actual spent, look at 2016. I came in $10,000 under budget. 2017, $51,000 under budget. 2018, I was $46,500 under budget. And that, again, it's not because I was padding the budget to begin with and we had that much left over. It was because of some of the working with the unions, switching people around, setting different policies, maybe buying something that, at a lower price that somebody offered that we found out later on after my budget was submitted. That's how we came up with some of these numbers, because you can see we have a considerable cost savings between 2015 and now. And it also goes to show you that as you hire officers, a lot of your other expenses go down as well as far as your operating expenses. So can we go where we are? This is last year. 91 police officers. Actually, we're at 90 because one is suspended. So, but on the books, technically it's 91. There's still plus one that needs to be hired from 2019. I'm just being very picky about who I choose on that. If you take a look at the calls for service between 2009 and 10 years and 2019, we went up about 18,000 calls for service. Our officers spent about 54,000 hours on that. So you see it was more than doubled. But look at the motor vehicles, look at the activity out there, and this is where sometimes we hurt ourselves. So when you're talking about 4,000 motor vehicle stops in 2009 compared to 18,600 in 2019, with basically the same amount of officers on the road. So the amount of officers on the road didn't change. We've always had the same amount of manpower in this police department since I was a police explorer, since I've been 16 years old. Same amount of officers working the road, same amount of supervisors as well. Now, this is where sometimes it hurts us as a police department because, again, you see that finished product when you're out there, and Captain Plecky and I were just having this discussion this morning. When you could see at any given time, you drive down Route 9, you see somebody pulled over. I see it all the time when I'm off duty. I see it constantly. Every now and if I'm driving my truck around town, I'll have my radio on, I constantly hear it. So there's something that's called police omnipresence. It's basically given the look that there's more officers than there truly are. So that's what our officers are out there doing. It's not because they want to give that perception that there's more of them out there. It's just that they're out there hustling. These officers are out there breaking their butts every single day. I see it. I see the stats. So I know that they're actually doing it. And plus, again, you can throw stats up there all you want, but when you actually see it, you feel it, you know it's a true representation of that. So the officers are out there. So that's when it sometimes hurts us and go, you know what, the public sees us, the public praises us, public crime is lower, our overdoses are lower. It's working, so why do you need more police officers if it's working? And again, it's what goes on behind the scenes in order to get to this. That's where the struggle comes in. So 2019, this is where overtime comes in. $700,000 was budgeted in overtime. Initially, the request was $750,000. It was back down to $700,000. $20,000 was removed to cover. TSD is township-sponsored details. That's construction details that our officers work that are township-sponsored. So the township is not getting hit with basically paying the salary of a police officer at a higher rate that a contractor would be paying them. Can you go on? 2019. So this is what I want to touch on.
Could I ask, I'm sorry, what was $20,000 was removed from what? to put where?
I'll explain that to you. Out of his overtime line, we had made a subcategory for extra duty. So if it's a township-sponsored road job, for example, some of the paving jobs that our engineering department is coordinating, it's paid at the extra duty rate, but we needed a line to pull it from. So we wanted to capture the true amount. Instead of just charging it against his overtime line, we created a subcategory for that.
So if, and I might be saying it wrong, Lou, you please help me out, but don't we receive monies in from the construction companies? Don't they pay for that? I mean, from when the meetings that I've been in, we get reimbursed, right, from the construction companies?
Most jobs we do. However, some of them that we're managing in-house, it's not the construction crew that's paying it. Well, they can, but we would wind up charging a fee on top of that. So that's what was going on previously, was we were charging ourselves the fees on top of it. So now
I remember the whole discussion, but it just doesn't, I don't know.
It's township-sponsored work versus non-township-sponsored work. So
Then doesn't it look like an overtime would be higher? If you're taking out of an overtime line, if you're adding,
That's why we created the separate category, so we could track that separately. So it wouldn't show as it was overtime being paid through the police budget. It's better accounting, if you will, creating a subcategory.
So, so Jim, this is similar to code enforcement, like all the fees. All these road jobs go to the general fund?
Yes.
So all the road jobs that you're,
Well, it depends. There's the township road jobs, and then there's outside duty road jobs.
so separating, so.
Right, so the outside duty road jobs, yes.
So this was a line item.
Township road jobs, no, because what used to happen was we would put it into the construction project, right? So the contractor would submit a bill for police officers to do the work. We would then pay them through the typical process. They would turn around and cut a check back to the police department. The police department would turn around and cut a check, or hand a check back to Lou, and we would just go in a big circle. So we tried to eliminate that for the township-sponsored projects. But outside-sponsored projects are right to the general fund.
This also allowed a mechanism for the police officers working the extra duty. If it's a township-sponsored event, they would get paid at the next payroll, where if it's a private event, we would have to wait for the contractor to submit payment to the township, and then the officer gets paid for the job that they worked.
So the one thing I just want to highlight, because this is actually a stat that I'm somewhat proud of. So I requested $750,000 in my budget for overtime in 2009. We just working together, we figured out, okay, maybe we can come in at $700,000 with a little bit of control mechanisms in place, with the understanding that if I got hit with any type of significant investigation, any type of severe storm, that number is basically just a basic operation number. That doesn't include any type of emergency. Well, of course, what happens, right? So we have a storm that knocks out power of nearly the entire town for 3 days. That was in end of what, July?
July.
We have a murder in October, and that same night we have an officer-involved shooting. All three things will just wipe out a police overtime budget, besides an active shooter. So when you look at it, when you look at where I came in at 738, it was still under what was originally projected of 750. And on top of that, I instituted an extra patrol supervisor policy from Memorial Day to Labor Day because of the amount of call volume that one supervisor was responsible for, and the officers, it's known as span of control in the police field, and how many officers a supervisor can properly supervise. Nowadays, it's 3 to 5. In my police department right now, it's anywhere from 8 to 12 per supervisor, so that's not good. So I had to put some some policies in place in order to help those supervisors out, because you know what happens when the supervision can't supervise, right? Bad things happen, leads to lawsuits, and you end up paying more in the end than you would if you would have instituted this. So having that extra supervisory coverage, having a storm, homicide, officer-involved shooting, we still came in under the projected $750,000. In my expenses, my operation expenses, I came in $30,000 under budget this year, last year in 2019. Next. So where were we going? This I'm just forecasting in the police department. I want to continue to operate in the most effective and efficient manner while providing the highest level of services to community. I've said that repeatedly. Constantly look at our policies, create policies, look at our procedures, hiring and promoting, our professional development. We're all in this together. Like I said, it's very important on those that I hire to meet the high standards of our police department that have been in place for a very long time. The actions of one officer can definitely have an effect on the entire agency. So I'm very careful on how we do that. Constantly reevaluating our policies in the police department, especially when it comes to manpower issues, vacation requests, all in compliance of all my collective bargaining agreements. Technology, this is where the budget sees the most increase in, is technology. Continues to grow each year. The technologies in our police department that I've seen just in my short tenure as chief is beyond probably what we've had in the past 10 years prior to that. More and more keeps coming down on us, especially in the area of body camera and all the redaction, the software that's needed for it, the retention. We just recently installed a redundant server system up here, which costs a considerable amount of money as well. But when you look at the cost of the body camera, you look at what could potentially happen if we don't have that incident captured on body camera, like we saw with the officer-involved shooting, where it was completely captured, the entire incident. And because of that, I'm not going to say there won't be, but there hasn't been a lawsuit. And on top of that, even if there is, that it should be strongly defended because it was 100% justified. Reducing administrative workload on sworn and assigning to civilian, we already talked about that as well. Bringing back some of my retired officers, assigning some of the duties and responsibilities to some of my special officers, and increased patrol supervision. We just spoke about that. Also, resiliency is big now within the state. We talk about the officers' mental health. That is my initiative last year. Before that, it was the officers' physical health. More officers commit suicide each year than they do die in the line of duty. Extremely important. I know there was notification to the manager and the governing body a couple days ago where my officers had to do CPR on an infant. They're actually, right now, they're in critical incident stress debriefing right now as a result of that. So it's very important that we take care of our officers' health. I'm definitely committed to that, and I know all of you are in this room as well. Next.
Chief, I have one question about the technology.
Yes.
Why would we not have it in the cloud versus having a server?
Steve here? Yeah, Steve, can you explain that? Because I know it's actually, I think it's more expensive in the long run, is it?
Yes,
In the cloud?
yes.
Well, it's also safer though, no?
It's not necessarily safer, and it's a subscription service. So they get you, just like when you buy a printer for $100, but the cartridges are, $80, $90 a cartridge. So it's the same thing with the cloud. We have looked into that, and just wasn't cost effective.
Okay.
You can go sit down. Okay, thanks.
Thank you.
Anytime you need me.
I didn't tell you to sit down. Okay. Okay, next slide. I just asked a simple question. So let's get into this authorized strength, because I know you've been hearing me say this for quite some time. So I just want to just hold off there for right now. So this authorized strength came about, it's been set for a very long time, but us by ordinance, it was originally adopted back in 2002. And it's an agreement bound by ordinance between a law enforcement chief executive and a governing body outlining the structure of the police department. So it sets that structure of what's needed inside the police department. That way you're not constantly coming back, asking for more manpower, being denied it, being approved. Originally was adopted in 2002, it was last updated in 2009, and the last requested updating was in November of this year with the manager, and we're working on that. Next. So when I talk about being mutually respected, if we did a study of...
I'm sorry.
Go ahead.
Could you go back to this? What is this really? Is this a contract between you and the township? Is that what it is?
It is...
Like an agreement, an MOU?
Correct. It's an ordinance.
An
created-
ordinance?
It's an ordinance right now, back in 2002.
Oh,
Then
right.
Chief Carter meets with the
Wow.
governing body, probably met with the township manager to begin with, and they outline the structure of the police department, how many officers are going to be in it. In fact,
Is there any, I don't want to use the word regulation, but like how often it's supposed to be updated? Something like this should be updated? I mean, if it's not been updated for 10 years.
it's something that should be revisited.
Like every other year, maybe?
Correct. And the reason being is that the demographics of your town changed,
Yeah.
population changes, crime changes. So nowhere in this does it talk about your town's going to get hit 6 years with a significant heroin problem. But this did cover that. It doesn't specifically say it in there, but the manpower issues, the manpower recommendations in here has that covered.
So what appears happened when the financial crisis many years ago, they had reduced the number of officers. It looks like that ordinance was never changed to reflect the downsizing of the department. They just left it at the maximum value that's allowed. And generally, that's what the ordinance is. It's a guideline that, it allows the governing body to have control over how many officers can be appointed. So, but I would agree that it should be updated.
I mean, 10 years is, once it's written, it's outdated, right?
Sure.
So 10 years is like, can we have this updated this year?
We can. I was waiting to see how the budget was going to play out before making recommendations.
Okay,
Can we have a copy of the ordinance also?
that would be great, thanks.
Yeah,
I have it up here.
perfect.
There's some scribble on it, but it's all relative to what we're talking about. So when I talk about it being mutually respected, if you did a study, and I'll give you this example, the governing body just recently did a study on the Long Branch Police Department. It came back in favor of the police department. The council then just basically disregarded basically stated that they needed more supervisors, they needed this, and
Wait,
because
could
it
you
wasn't...
repeat that again?
So, when I talk about it being mutually respected, what I mean by that is, and I'm going to give an example. Long Branch, the governing body, just did a police study, had a consultant come in at their expense to study the police department. The study came back favorable to the police department, saying that they needed an increase in this, this, and this. Well, that wasn't advantageous to the governing body because it cost them money, so they just let it go instead of taking those recommendations. So it's the same thing here. So you have an authorized strength, you have an ordinance that states that your police department shall not have this, shall have not, and it sets limits on that of 111 police officers. And I'm going to tell you that right now, I'm not looking for 111 police officers. And that's why this kind of needs to be revised somewhat.
Chief, how many officers do they have in Middletown?
Right here. 92.
It's actually, you read ahead, I'm actually going to get
No,
that.
I'm not, I didn't read ahead.
Yeah.
It's in here?
It's actually on there, yeah. I did a analysis of 2 Monmouth County Police Departments and 2 Ocean County. So if we
funny.
just go, I'll get to that, Mayor. So allows the chief to strategically plan and operate the police department, provides direction, forecast, proper preparation of a budget. So I don't have to, me or another chief, we don't have to keep doing this every single year. Reduces the burden on you as a governing body to put that pressure on you to either hire or say yes or no to police officers. Proper allocation of resources. If a chief knows how many officers he's supposed to have, then he's able to put those officers in those units or assignments.
You mentioned a ratio before with
Yes.
the sergeant and the
Yes.
and the
span
team.
of-
So how off are we from that ratio?
So there's different ratios that can be used for that. It's universal. The one standard that they use that IACP uses, the National Council on Mayors and Managers, they use more of a workload. But standard is 2.5 officers for every 1,000 residents. So if you have, and this is where I'm going to talk about being realistic and unrealistic. You take Farmingdale, for example, that has 1,300 residents in their census. You take 1,300 residents and you apply that 2-for-1, it's about 3.5 officers. So when you look at it and go, yep, Farmingdale can be policed with 3.5 officers. That's pretty realistic. But then you take Howell and you apply that 2.5 ratio to 55,000 people, or 53, or whatever it may be. We tend to think it's about 55,000, and then it's 125 police officers. It's not realistic, right? Would I like to have 125? Sure. Many police departments down south, South Carolina, around the nation, they have equivalent populations with 125, 150 police officers. But obviously, their pay is significantly less than ours. So, and I just brought this up at the last Citizens Academy. As a chief, you have to start saying, okay, I got to be a little more reasonable here. Our officers are very well paid. Can't have everything that I want. Can't have that 125 police officers. I'm not even looking for 111 police officers. I would rather have my officers be well paid, have a very high retention rate, have them very happy in their job, than have, the authorized strength, which will then prevent them from getting those raises. So as a chief, that's what I look at. And in the next couple of slides, you'll see where I compare how many police officers each town has. So what also you have to look at is your calls for service. So you saw how many calls for service I had last year. That just continues to grow, and that's legitimate calls. We took out meal breaks. We took out all those other things that we track. Crime, obviously we have a relatively low crime rate, and I'll talk about that. For a town of our size, geographically located where we are, we should have a significant amount of crime, and we really don't. And the reason why we do it is that our partnership between the police department and the community, when somebody sees that suspicious-looking car sitting in their cul-de-sac, my officers are treating it as if it's their own. We don't ignore it. And it's a whole broken windows theory that we know in police department. You take care of the small issues before they become big ones. Needs and expectations of the community. Obviously, we know what the community expects out of us. If I don't post something up within 10 minutes of it happening, I got Howell happenings all over me. Proactive versus reactive patrol. We're very proactive. You have to also look at officer safety, and I brought this up at the last Citizens Academy as well. Yes, we're a large town. I can tell you this, we're minimally staffed every single day. Back when I was a patrol officer, I got into a very nasty fight with somebody at the old Flame Motel, and it took an officer about 10 minutes in order to get there. He came from the bowling alley in order to back me up. So when I start looking at deployment of officers and how many officers I'm going to have on a shift, it's not just the call volume, it's also officer safety as well. And when it comes down to it, it reduces liability in the long run, right? So officers are able to quickly react, quickly respond, and also reduces, obviously, any type of injury that they may incur being out there by themselves, right? And I get it. There's other police departments, in the United States that probably back us 1,000 miles away. I get it. Next slide. Current staffing, this is where I'm at right now, and you'll see what we're dealing with. Chief of Police is one. In parentheses is what is authorized under the ordinance. Captains were at maxed out. Lieutenants were maxed out. This is where we went and wanted to revise the ordinance back in November with the manager. I'm maxed out at lieutenants right now. I have one out on terminal leave right now, so I'm down a lieutenant. So I'm down a lieutenant on a patrol squad, and that's being backfilled right now with overtime. So this is why it needs to be revised. It's not saying that I need additional lieutenants. Obviously, it would be nice, but when I have a situation like this where I have a lieutenant out on terminal leave, I have a squad without a lieutenant, contractually I have to pay now a sergeant to take over those lieutenants' responsibilities. So it would be the same thing if I kept that integrity of the squad and promoted another lieutenant while this lieutenant was out on terminal leave before retirement. And then once that lieutenant retired, you're back down to 5 again. So that's where the ordinance needs to be revised, because I can't do anything right now. I can't make an additional lieutenant to take over that position. So now I have a patrol squad right now without a lieutenant. I have a sergeant taking over the responsibilities. I have to backfill it with overtime. So actually what's happening now, it's costing more money than it would be to make that actual promotion. That's why the ordinance needs to be revised.
So, question, if there's an employee that's terminal,
Yes.
does he not come off the books? He stays on?
Using up their sick time for a max of 45 working days.
Okay. So can you replace? Okay,
I'm sure if I have an officer that goes on, there's still wiggle room within my patrolman. So I'm sure if I came to the manager and said, listen, which I had just last week, I have a patrolman that retired, can I hire a new one to replace him? He's out on terminal leave. I'm sure he won't have a problem with that. We've addressed this before because there's room in my ordinance to do that. I have 71 patrolmen right now. I have 90 that are authorized. Obviously, I have a lot of wiggle room. But when I have a lieutenant, even a
Right.
sergeant I can do, when I have a lieutenant go out on terminal leave, and this is an issue with terminal leave, I got rid of it in my contract. I didn't have any issue with it. When a lieutenant goes out on terminal leave, they're still on the book, so I still have 5 lieutenants. I can't, and she's out on terminal leave until May 1st. So between now and May, I don't have a lieutenant, and I can't do anything with that because I don't have no more wiggle room to work with there. Now, if that would come before the council, it has to come before for 2 readings, which is a month. So even best case scenario, I'm more than a month away from replacing that lieutenant. I haven't ran a lieutenant's test yet because as soon as I run a test and the results come out, the clock starts on the expiration of that. So I'm not going to create a test to have it be invalid for a month.
Right,
I'm not going
right.
to do that. So
Could I
that's
ask about,
yeah.
no, I'm sorry, go ahead, I didn't mean to cut you.
that's where it just gets a little where you're trying to move people around in order to.
But as a
obviously-
governing body, if we agreed, we could fix that.
Correct.
Could you tell me about the suspension? Is that the same thing as somebody that's terminal?
No, that officer is suspended
Well, I
because he was
mean,
arrested.
if they're suspended, but, so did it come off of your,
No, so
Well, that's what I'm
I still
asking.
consider, even though that officer, I mean, correct me if I'm wrong, but I still would consider that officer still technically a sergeant. So I wouldn't ask for,
how long has he been suspended? They, he, she?
but once that officer did get suspended, I got the authorization to move another sergeant
Okay,
into the place, so,
okay.
yeah. That was immediate. And that sergeant has been suspended since September of 2018. Patrolman at 71, that also includes detectives. Detectives are patrolmen assigned to investigations. So we're at 71 right now with an authorized strength of 90. So this is what also needs to be taken into consideration when you're doing staffing. I have 2 officers currently deployed in the military. I have 1 on restricted duty as a result of an officer-involved shooting, and I have 1 officer that's on terminal leave until March 1st. Then he's off the books, and that's Corporal Bishop. He used up a lot of his sick time already, so he doesn't have too much terminal leave, which is good. I have no officers out on injury, no officers on light duty, no officers on maternity leave, no officers on family leave. I rarely have any type of officers ever on light duty. When they are, actually I have 1. I have Officer Woolley, who just had corrective surgery for a head-on accident. He was involved in coming off a road construction detail. So that is actually wrong. I do have 1 officer that's on light duty, and he's assigned to our training staff so he can actually do some work, without, while on light duty. So when you talk about, your personnel, those are the things that you also have to plan for as well. If I had several officers at that shooting, all of them would still be on restrictive duty, and all their positions would be backfilled with overtime. Our SLEO program here, it's since 2015. You see, we have 1. I already discussed a lot of their responsibilities, but our 2s, they supplement our patrols. They can't take the place of an officer. They only could supplement. So, for example, on Friday and Saturday nights, I have an 8 officer or 9 officer minimum. 2 of them on a road. That's either 10 or 11 officers I have out on a road. They can't replace the officer that would normally have been working there. They can't do that. That's actually a PERC decision. But they absolutely do help out, and that has never been an issue as far as the budgeting of those officers. We use that as a pathway to an officer. So we get these officers, they're out there, they get their full certification, full ride-along, full field training, everything, and then when it's time to go, we just change the patch on their arm, and they become a full-fledged officer. So civilian staff on the other side there, this is just as a police department, I'm very low on civilian staff. I'm not even addressing that. But I only have 4 full-time administrative assistants. 2 are in records. 1 is in investigations downstairs, and one is Carlene, who's my executive assistant. 3 part-time admin assistants, 2 records, and I have not replaced a records position of full-time because instead I temporarily replaced it with part-timers in there. 2 in records, and there's 1 in the chief's office doing all the social media and events and helping out Carlene with purchase orders. I have 2 part-time technical services assistants. They do the watch guard, they do public records, they do information technology, communications, they help out with the fleet. 12 dispatchers, also known as telecommunicators. 10 are full-time, 2 are part-time, and we just train those part-timers, and when it's time to, if there's ever time to replace one, we just move those right over. 1 senior telecommunications, who's Steve Garrity, he's also network services. 1 EMS coordinator, full-time, 1 EMS supervisor, part-time, 31 EMTs, part-time. No full-time EMTs, they have been requested. Total police employees, I have 170, and I work with 4 unions. And I relatively keep quiet. Right.
That's funny.
In comparison, here's Middletown, Long Branch, Jackson, and Brick. I had to throw Jackson up there for the manager. Middletown has a population of 10,000 more than us. Here's their sworn personnel. This is all directly from all the chiefs that I solicited. Their authorized strength is 115. They have 1 chief, 3 deputy chiefs. They don't have captains. 10 lieutenants. I have 5. They have 15 sergeants. I have 10. 84 patrolmen. I have 70. Their overtime budget, you see, is significantly less than ours, $425,000. So about $300,000 less than ours. Long Branch, population of 31,000. Sworn, same as us, basically. Authorized strength is 92. That's kind of where we're at, around there. They have a deputy chief's position that's not filled yet. It's anticipated they have 4 captains. 1 is going to be a deputy chief, so they'll go down to 3. 7 lieutenants, 14 sergeants, and their overtime budget's $423,000. Jackson, population of 56, sworn. Actual right now, they have 92. Their authorized is 94. Chief expects to be at 94 by the spring. 1 chief, 2 captains, 4 lieutenants, 14 sergeants, 71 patrol officers, and their overtime budget's $410,000. See the trending with the overtime budget? Brick, there'll be 75,000. They're going to be at 150 by next year. 1 chief, 1 deputy chief, 3 captains, 7 lieutenants, 109 patrol officers, and their overtime budget is $1.125 million. And I wouldn't have put this on there if this wasn't true. All the departments that I surveyed, I'm vice president of the Chiefs Association right now, so I can contact any of these chiefs. All of them are either at, or some of them are actually above their authorized strength. I didn't put Lakewood in here. Lakewood is its own separate issues. They just continue to grow. They're up over 150,000, but their population is exploding as well. Ours is basically stabilized. And Toms River continues to grow somewhat. They're about 165 police officers. But Middletown is very comparable to us. Same amount of calls for service. Their geographical location is a little bit, closer to New York City, a little bit of higher population, but our call volume is the same. So when I talk about how busy we are, they're just about as busy as we are. They actually have more people to do it. And when they're at their authorized strength, you see at their overtime budget. In fact, the chief, that's his overtime budget. He came in under that because he has the proper amount of personnel. Next. Doing more with less. Again, I talked about the finished product. This is where I want to talk about some of the retirements. So as of 2020, I have 6 officers that are eligible to retire. 2 of them are sitting with you right here, me and Captain Pilecki. Probably neither of us are going anywhere. Retirements as of today, there have been 2 since the beginning of the year. That was Corporal Bishop and Lieutenant Dodd. I expect 2 more this year, so that's 4. This is where I've requested a 2-for-1 officer replacement, whereas for every 1 officer that retires, I'm asking for 2 to replace it. 1 retires at top pay, to bring in 2 at starting pay. Savings will be realized in the future, because I'll talk about this. My number sitting in front of you today is 100 police officers. That's 11 less than what was authorized back in 2002. When I talk about real numbers and actually being able to see it and feel it, this is another example. When I was 2009, when I was a lieutenant, I was assigned to training, and we had 99 police officers there. We had a traffic unit, we had a community services unit, we had K-9, we had all that. We had enough detectives, and you could just feel that the department ran efficiently. there wasn't what we have right now where I have staff coming into my office every single day going, Chief, I need, what's your approval? I need this, I need this, I need more personnel. Can you give me a special? Can you do something? Can you do this? It's on a weekly. I don't let it leave my department because we make it work, and sometimes that's where it hurts a department, where you make it work. And listen, I can go down to 60 officers and I can still handle my calls for service, but it just, everything else would just, your investigations, your drugs, everything like that would just go right out the door. So once you get to 100, which is 8 from now, once you get to that number, 100, when a senior officer, and you're going to start seeing all the retirements coming this year. I was the first officer hired under the chief that retired. So it's my generation of officers that are now all retiring. Corporal Bishop just retired. I went to the academy with him. He retired, last week, 2 weeks ago. So it's now everyone. We went on a hiring spree after I got hired. There was a tremendous amount of officers hired. There was 75 when I first got hired, and we went up to 99 in a short time. So you're going to start seeing that these senior officers at top pay starting to retire. So once you hit 100 and those officers now start retiring, then it's just 1 for 1. So now you're taking that officer that's making $130-something thousand a year, bringing in an officer making $50,000 a year. I'm not talking about the health insurance and all that, because that's still, but you're still saving that a significant amount of money. And as we get those officers, and I start working on my overtime, and I know that we brought this up at the last, there's not much I can do right now as far as my overtime. I look at my policies, I can change some policies. A lot of it's contractual, so I can't do too many things anymore in order to keep reducing that overtime. Certain things I can do, but it's not going to drop it down considerably. The manpower is what's going to make those numbers drop. So that's why I talk about a 2 for 1 now until I get to 100. You won't hear another word out of me after I get to 100, and you'll start seeing those savings. So it's going to be a little bit more expensive to begin with, but yes, I start to see the savings in the future. And we can make the argument that, okay, you now have 8 more officers who are going to be going up the step, and it's going to cost more money. Yes, I get it, but you also, as they're going up the step, those officers that are staying are going up the step as well too, right? So overtime is not the solution. The guys appreciate it. They do. Officer fatigue. I know Councilman Bonovich, he was a victim of a theft not too long ago. And one thing he told me is that when the officer came to the house, he looked really tired. Well, that officer just got done working a midnight shift. There was day shift overtime available. And he did. A lot of these younger officers, they got growing families, right? They got nice cars, and they just suck up the overtime. But overtime is definitely not a solution. As a chief, as supervisors, we have to manage that, because officer fatigue is a serious, as a traffic officer right here, a driver that's fatigued is equivalent to a driver that's drunk. We all know this, right? So now I have a fatigued officer out there trying to make these critical decisions, driving a patrol car, driving into an emergency situation. Is not only harmful to him, it's harmful to the other officers that he has to protect as well in case something bad goes down. And that's when I talk about the unintentional preventable consequences. Decrease in performance, quality of work goes down, his perception, his reactionary time goes down as well. Mistakes happen. When mistakes happen in our line of work, people get hurt, right, or people die. And that's when the lawsuits come in. It affects other officers, and again, with the liability. So over time, yeah, I'm sure that the guys appreciate it, but it comes to a point that it's just too much. Next slide.
How have you been able to control the overtime? Could you just share that?
So, yes, I think. So going from that 1.3 million, right, that I touched on back in 2015, a lot of it was just abiding by the contract, just saying that, nope, you're not entitled to do this. It's working with my unions. They understood it. It's not giving overtime when there's other ways to handle a certain situation. I did blackout dates. Certain dates are blacked out. Holidays blacked out. Officers can't take time off. National Night Out, trunk or treat, 4th of July. A lot of those times, yeah, it became an issue with the union, but we sat there and we talked it. We talked it over. What I also did was, during those busy months when I spoke about before, was between Labor Day, or Memorial Day and Labor Day, all of my non-patrol staff have to work at least 2 weeks on the road. Reason being is that it gives those patrol officers an opportunity who may have been denied a day because of overtime, allows them to take time off, plus it enhances the skills of the officers not assigned to patrol. So it reduces the overtime. So I even partake in that as well. Wasn't able to do it last year. We just got too busy on certain times that I was going to do it. But I intend to do it this year as well. So if I count as manpower, an officer calls out, I replace him with my regular pay, rather than assigning that to overtime. So it was really a group effort working with the unions. Again, you don't really hear too many unions, agreeing with you to try to reduce overtime, but we all work very well together. Everyone understands the responsibility. Everyone understands that they have it very good. Obviously they still have enough overtime. Every single patrol shift is short right now. Every single patrol shift is working at minimum manpower right now. So, and there's other things that we did as well. But those are the major cost-saving moves that I made in order to reduce that amount of overtime.
I just, I'd like to add on to that quality of service that the chief brought up. Something did happen 10 days ago at my house, and an officer came up, I guess, doing a double, and I saw it in his eyes. He did a hell of a great job, but you could see it. And that's, like the chief said, driving around tired, that's a liability for all of us, so. And just going over these notes that the chief gave us, I always go back to Middletown too, and looking over this, and, it says they have 113 actual, and I looked them up. They have 7 patrols. We have 6, correct? 6 patrolling districts?
We have actually 7.
7.
patrol
All right,
districts.
so they have 7 with 113. We have 7 with 90.
Right.
So that's 23 officers difference between Middletown and Howell. That's a big,
But you also have to look at how many officers are assigned to the patrol division as well. So, like right now, my investigation,
one per.
my investigation unit is fully staffed. So I even have patrol officers temporarily assigned down there just to enhance their abilities out on the road. So I have a full complement of investigation detectives. I would like to add another traffic safety officer. My school officers are good. It's just that I need more supervisors. Or if not, I'm going to have to increase my overtime a little bit to allow them to work those extra shifts. Or I need additional police officers. That way I can institute a buffer on my patrol shifts. So right now, follow me on this, you have minimum scheduling levels and minimum manning levels. Scheduling is on evening shift. You can schedule 10, but you can work with 8. So if 2 people call out, you still at least are still at 8. Right now, my scheduling and my manning levels are the same. I don't have that buffer. So as soon as someone calls out, it's automatic overtime.
So financially, you put all these retirements here. Obviously, the 2-for-1, that's pretty much the route.
I would say that would be my recommendation, a 2-for-1 until we hit 100, and then it's 1-for-1 after that.
And how long would that take to get the 8 if it was 2-for-1? 2020, 2021?
Well, four officers are retiring this year.
Okay,
That'll give you your.
It gives you 8.
okay. Thank you.
Chief, I have a question about the legal advisor. This is a new position, correct? There's nobody there currently?
Correct.
All right, and what exactly, and I think you mentioned it before, but briefly, but what exactly would they be doing on a day-to-day?
Actually, I forwarded a memo to the manager back in November, basically detailing that. So it'd be in-house counsel. A lot, what they would be doing was fulfilling OPA requests. They would be reviewing some of our policies, working in coordination with the prosecutor's office. We have a part-time prosecutor right now for court. They would be working alongside the part-time prosecutor in order to facilitate all the court matters with our officers. Now, could it be part-time? Can we start off part-time and see how it works? I don't see an issue with that as well.
That's kind of where I was going.
Yeah. I don't have an issue with that.
Do you think that, are there other grants out there maybe that we can look for, that you can look for to supplant some of the dollars for the officers?
The advisor, you mean?
No, I'm talking
for
about
officers.
for officers.
They meant-
So last year, we made the decision, we sat and spoke about how can we get additional police officers through a grant. So for the past, since 2005, if you see the signs on Route 9, it says safe corridor. fines doubled, points doubled. Well, the fines are doubled, it goes into a pool for all Route 9 police departments, and we're one of them. So last year, I don't know how much we see, it's 56,000 maybe last year, right, a little around there.
56.
So back in 2008, it was 89,000. That's when we got a Durango, I got a traffic trailer, we got the first Charger in like Monmouth County, so it was a big deal. But since then, it has slowly gone down. It's gone down to, now last year was 56,000. Well, that was used to buy our motorcycles in the previous years. It was cars, that traffic truck that we have that we just recently got painted up. That was bought with those funds as well. We decided that I'm good with equipment, I really am, and let's start pushing that funds towards officer salaries. So for instance, last year, 3 officers were approved. 1 officer was covered under that Safe Corridor grant, moved them right into traffic. So it has to be traffic related, so that's what we did there. We have Safe and Secure grant, which is about 46,000. 60,000 Safe and Secure grant from the state. That goes to pay for, supplement the salary of our officer that's inside the school. On top of that, the Board of Education gives us $45,000 a year to supplement that officer. Regional district gives us another $45,000. We just got a check for $90,000 for the past 2 years to keep that officer inside the high school as well. The COPS grant. So the COPS grant we apply for every year. We get denied every year. And again, it's one of those situations where since you're good at what you do, you get punished. So a lot of those grants over the past year, and I was unfortunate to have to fill out 2 of them when I was a lieutenant and a captain. You spend a lot of time on them only to see that these grants go to police departments that don't have strong ties to their community, where you see race relation issues, where you see crime, where you see a lot of violence. And this year, they took that grant and they made the qualifications a little bit different. So for the past month and a half, I've had a captain working on it, but it's something that I'm reluctant to bring up because of the past history with that grant, whereas towns like ours just don't get it. If we weren't good at what we did, we'd get it. If our community hated us and we're rioting every day, we would get a lot of money.
I think I'm okay with not getting the money, though, at this
Yeah,
point,
but
when you put
you're
it that
trying to
way.
when you're trying to offset a budget.
Well-
And that is a reimbursement grant. So what happens is, they'll give you the money up front, and I'll tell you this flat out. We requested 10 officers out of this grant. It's $1.2 million. They cover $120,000 per officer for 3 years. After that, the town now has to pick it up, and they just can't lay off. They can't lay off the police officers. They can't say, okay, the grant's done, sorry, we're laying you off. They're obligated to that, or they'll get sued by the federal government. So that's something that we're looking into right now. It's not something that I anticipate us getting. If we do get it, I mean, it's great. It's just an addition. It'll take off some of this burden off my request, but it's not something that we should rely on. Safe Corridor grant, yes. Safe and Secure grant, yes. We get for a bullet-resistant vest, we get 2 grants from that as well. A couple other small grants that we're able to get. But the COPS grant by the federal government, that's the major one. You usually see that going to larger police departments. You also have to have a political affiliation as well. A congressman has to sign off on it. But we're working, because there's micro grants under it, we're working with the PAL in order to try to secure at least a micro grant to get a couple officers. So again, all the stuff that goes on behind the scenes that people don't really know about, that takes up a lot of time,
I don't have any more questions on this.
That was a lot.
I had nothing.
Did you want to get into EMS or communications at all?
Sure. My communications budget, I can tell you it's less this year than it was last year. So that's my 911 operators. My 2019 budget was $1,045,484. My 2020 requested budget is $1,024,264, $21,220 less, and that's as a result. That was a result of me taking 2 telecommunicators, making them patrol officers, and bringing in 2 additional people at a lower starting salary. There's 1 telecommunicator that still has to be replaced, that's already been budgeted for. And there has been a recommendation to my office this past week in order to replace one of those telecommunicators. Other than that, there's nothing else to that budget.
Do you have any questions on this,
Oh,
Tom?
I had nothing, no.
Good, thank you, Chief.
Thank you, Chief.
EMS?
EMS.
Give you a little history on our EMS program. We came about in 2002 after we had a lot of problems with our volunteers not being able to answer the calls. I remember as a patrol officer having to sit on a call for a year. Right, I'm sure that same thing in Jackson, right? Kind of crazy. So we went off of us and Brick, ended up starting our programs together. We went off the Toms River model. We started off by hiring all part-timers. Fortunately, since I became chief, we transitioned over to one full-time coordinator who's here today, right behind me, Peggy Doyle. But since then, a lot of other towns, and you can see this, we're very fortunate here in Howell, even though we had some problems with two of our squads. Howell First Aid continues to remain strong, and we work with them in order to provide the emergency services throughout the town. We do billing, we bill insurance companies. Howell residents are not responsible for the balance after the insurance company picks it up, and Howell residents are not responsible if they are uninsured. It's a free service to them as well. Problem that we're having in EMS is that we've been part-time for a very long time. When I was put in charge of the program in 2012, there was about a $450,000 deficit that we were in, and a lot of it was caused by uncollected funds. So we hired a new billing company who went after charging people for these uncollected funds, and we were able to secure some of it, not all of it. But now I'm proud to report over the past few years, our income exceeds, correct me if I'm wrong, our income actually exceeds our operating costs. So what I've requested, and the problem a lot of other squads are having in other towns is the same, but they're basically abolishing a lot of their EMS, their volunteers, whereas we're fortunate we don't have to do that here. But they're starting up EMS programs in their police department, Manchester, the most recent, where they're hiring all full-timers. EMS, Manchester just started, they hired 25 full-timers. I have one who's a coordinator. They hired 25. And what we're starting to get is a lot of our 30 part-timers, and correct me if I'm wrong, we lost 30 in the past 5 years? 36. We lost 36 EMTs in the past 5 years to other agencies that are either higher paying or full-time. Yes, being part-time does save a considerable amount of money on the health benefits side of it, but we're just in a circle of just training people and they leave. We train them and they leave. We have to keep retraining new people more and more. So the recommendation was made a few years ago to start hiring full-time EMTs. And we did a study on it. I submitted it to management, and I proposed hiring several full-time EMTs this year. And that's what you see in the budget.
I have a question about, training and education. So in 19, there was 5,000, and you only used $700. And then this year, it went up to 13.
13,000 or 1,300
1,000,
in training?
unless I'm looking at the wrong item. Yeah, under EMS.
13,000. Okay, you want to help me out on this? Because in the proposal, I only see. I have your budget up here, and it has 10,000 down for training.
That is also inclusive of Dr. Lebowski's.
I'm sorry, I didn't hear that.
That includes
Our medical director that is contracted with the town.
I believe that's only 2,500, isn't it?
But why would that go into training and education?
Yeah.
He provides some of our training for us as well.
here on Mannequin right now, with the devices that are recommended, is upward of $1,000 just for the Mannequin. A lot of it is just, and with bringing some specialized instructors in to do some classes, specifically geared towards tactical training, active shooter training. Courses, teacher courses are upwards of $300 course per person.
But why would that go into EMS?
We train members of paramedics.
You were supposed to give us.
I have no other questions. I do have one question, I guess, for the gentleman. So I was looking at insurance. So if there's increased in salary, how could our insurance have gone down?
There was a decrease in the state health benefits, medical insurance for 2020.
Say that again, I'm sorry.
The state health benefits plan, our medical insurance, had a decrease for 2020.
Oh, it did?
Yes.
How much of a decrease?
Believe it was about 4%. And I actually just read an article today that the governor is proposing a decrease as well for 2021. So we'll see if that actually comes to fruition.
Yeah, but I don't see that. Yeah. But anyhow, the one considerable increase was reducing the amount of part-timers, increasing.
No, I know, I saw that.
Okay, all
I
right.
saw all of that.
Okay. And it was also a wage breakdown that I did that shows the benefit bond.
You're not the only one who did that. There are other departments took part-times and made them full-times. I caught all that, yeah.
I don't believe that there's any other department that does just strictly full-timers.
Strictly no, but in this budget that's been proposed, when you look at wages and salaries, you could see that the part-time is decreasing and the full-time is increasing, obviously, so
There's not,
they're,
as far as if you
oh,
look
not
at
just,
the,
I'm just talking about all the
yeah,
departments.
but if you look at the total expense between 2019 and 2020, it's not a very considerable increase because you're decreasing all of the part-timers and replacing, so part-timers working 28 hours, you're just working another 12 hours. But the problem comes in is the health benefits and everything else that's associated with a full-time
Yeah.
employee. That's where your costs go up. Because adding another 12 hours onto an employee that's already working,
nothing.
it's really.
Chief, thank you very much. You always come prepared and answer all our questions. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Thank you, Chief.
Thank you.
See you in class.
Right.
So I just have a couple of questions for you guys over there. Can we take a look at the proposed change for municipal taxes and total property taxes?
Thank you.
I mean, I'm not a thank you, Chief, very much. Thank you, everybody. I'm not a mathematician by any stretch, but the way I calculate it, looks like an increase of 6.77%. Is that what we're looking at for taxes?
So So as it was initially proposed, the amount to, as well as the amount of revenue that's going to be used to offset this budget, the amount of funds to be raised by taxation currently stands at an increase of 6.35%.
Mayor, keep in mind, there have been some reductions already made that might not be reflected in the paperwork that you have currently in front of you.
So if you could update it, that would be great.
I will.
So I could
It's
see.
a
I
constantly
know, I
ongoing
get it, I get it.
process.
I get it. But if we could see, the update, I mean, when do we have to have this on? April, yeah?
I'm getting close.
As soon as possible, but
Yeah.
I'm saying,
If
so if
any of
we,
you have any questions or specific concerns, I know,
well, I would like to see the updated numbers.
okay.
On this sheet, as well as, on this. Thank you. I don't have any other questions at this point. Do, gentlemen?
I don't, just want to thank you for all the hard work, and let's see if we can get that number down a little bit.
Well, so,
Continuing to work on it.
at this point, we need to open up, yeah?
Yes.
So I'd like to open this portion of the meeting to the general public. If you have any questions regarding the budget, please come up.
I'm sorry, this is probably discussed, but I missed the beginning.
Name-
Tina Smilek, 33 Charles Street.
Thank you.
And which I think we need to change that, saying our address on here, because it's very uncomfortable, especially if you're going to talk about national politics and all that, that you're putting our name and address for the whole world to see on not on Facebook, on YouTube and everything. I wish we didn't have to do the address, if we could come to where we don't have to state it on the
Well,
record, but maybe we could just write it.
So what is the policy in
I would
general?
have to check with our legal counsel to
Yeah,
see
that's
what's
what I'm
required.
asking,
Yeah,
yeah.
that's just my,
We'll ask.
because when you start talking about guns and everything else, you don't know the crazies out here, and it's going way beyond Howell. But anyway, what was the proposed budget for this year? Did we discuss that today, or we didn't?
We actually just went through
Okay.
3 departments.
So we're not really to that point yet? No. No problem. Thank you.
Thank you. Anyone else? Any new business? No? All right, let me get the date. At this point, I'm closing the open session, and we then will receive updates with the information. So then the next regular meeting is Tuesday, March 3rd, 2020, executive at 6:30, regular session at 7:30, and then March 24th is the second meeting of the month, executive at 6:30 and regular at 7:30. I would like entertain a motion to end the meeting.
So moved, Mayor.
Second.
Roll call, Mr. Bonovich?
Yes.
Mr. Russo?
Yes.
Mayor Brooker?
Yes, thank you. Thank you, gentlemen, ladies and gentlemen, for the hard work. I will say to you, looked at this budget. This is my 4th budget with you. This was the nicest budget. This was the best budget that I have seen in 4 years.
Thanks.
Awesome.
Not
So
complete
kudos
yet.
to you. What?
It's not complete yet.
Well, I get it, but
We're getting
I'm
there.
just saying, I was very pleased.
Thank you.
Okay,